Sometimes it just writes itself, right? Driving in today, and I know that I'm not going to be without Kevin Barker for the week because he's enjoying a little break. Actually, I think Hazel's got him doing a bunch of stuff around the house. But anyhow, I'm going to be by myself, no Kevin Barker, and I'm thinking, how can I turn Bowden Francis into 2 hours of quality radio? And then, wouldn't you know it, iPhone starts pinging. Did you see what Chris Bassitt said? Did you see what he said in Chris Rose's show? Oh, my God. So I got in the office and, of course, immediately tapped into what Chris Barker said today on the Chris Rose rotation. And to say that he's set the cat amongst the pigeons or the fox amongst the chickens, however you want to put it, would be kind of underselling it. Chris Bassitt had some thought. Now, Chris Bassitt's always got thoughts, right? Strike zone, the way pitchers are developed, whether or not the roof should be open when he's... I mean, he always has thoughts. But on the Chris Rose rotation, he was asked by Chris Rose, who, if I'm not mistaken, picked the Blue Jays to go to the World Series. He was asked by Chris Rose, the host of the Chris Rose rotation, which makes sense. That's why it's called the Chris Rose rotation. What went wrong with the 2024 Toronto Blue Jays? So let's...
The one thing I will say about the Blue Jays for this year is we put, I think, $700 million into Shohei Ohtani's basket and didn't get him. That was the reality. And then I think our pivot was we really didn't have a pivot to, like, say, another elite player, because in today's baseball, this is the reality of the landscape, is that you need 3 or 4 superstars. We have to get more hitting to protect Vladdy, and then the pitching has to be a lot better. There's so many things that you could talk about. I mean, I could literally talk for 45 minutes on this of things that didn't go great. But again, I just don't think saying those things publicly is what is best for this organization.
So there you go. That was Chris Bassitt. As a reporter, you love it when somebody says, I don't want to say anything about this, and then proceeds to say something about it. But I will say this. Chris Bassitt, if you say it'll take 45 minutes to let us know what's gone wrong with the Toronto Blue Jays this year, I'll give you 55. I'll give you a whole freaking hour. You can sit over there. You can sit over there in Kevin Barker's seat. I'm sure Barker won't mind. Just for a bit. I've got a lot of thoughts about what Chris Bassitt said. We're going to be joined later on in the show by Shai Davidi, who did a lot of work. In the last time I can remember something like this was 2009. I think Shai was with Canadian Press then. There was a lot of dissatisfaction. That time it was with Cito Gaston, the manager of the team. It led to the firing of J.P. Ricciardi. Anyhow, I don't want to go down that road right now, but I'll do that later with Shai, because there's some differences, some similarities. But Chris Bassitt wasn't done. No, God bless him. I mean, this guy might get a Hall of Fame vote for me when he retires. He was not done. Chris Rose asked him about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and his contract.
Toronto missed the boat a little bit with him not extending him?
I have been around some really, really good players, and I have never seen anyone like Vladdy. Like, I just haven't. Like, him the last month and a half, 2 months, whatever it may be, I was like, everyone talks about like 2021 Vladdy, the numbers that he had, his like MVP like season. I didn't see it really a lot last year. And then this year flipped, and like the first month or so, I was like, I don't see 2021 Vladdy. Like, I just don't see that. And then all of a sudden there was a just like light bulb that went off to like say like mechanical changes, whatever he may have done. And I was like, okay, this is the best hitter on the planet. I think Vladdy, I don't know this. I don't want to speak for him on this, but I think Vladdy wants to be a Blue Jay for the rest of his career. Like, I don't think he wants to leave. So I don't think it's like a super, super, super rush to like get an extension done. Like, they obviously didn't trade him because they don't ever see him or want him to be in another uniform. They're okay to go like arbitration, give him, I don't even know how much he's going to make next year. But I think both sides want to be together. I don't think there's a bad relationship. I don't think like it's a negative that he doesn't have an extension done yet. And maybe it's just like, hey, like both sides kind of want to be together. And Vladdy's like, listen, I'm going to hold off until closer to, say, free agency, because I don't know what a real fair value for me is right now. Like, the craziest part is to me that like if I was Vladdy and I was going into a free agency year, I'd be like, listen, you're moving me to third base because I'm gonna make a lot more money at third base than first base. And the reality is he is pretty damn good at third base. Like, I thought moving to Vladdy from first to third, I was like, this is gonna be an absolute crap show. Like, you know what I'm like, complete show, to be quite honest with you. There's no way Vladdy can play third. And then we moved him over to third. I'm like, damn, you actually can play third. Like, you played third obviously in the past, but like, I thought that was like a long time ago. He's actually pretty damn good at third base. So I would throw him over there 75% of the time. I wouldn't even put him at first base. I think he loves third base more than he loves first base anyway. So
Well, there you go. There is a crap ton to unpack from that. Chris Bassitt speaking with Chris Rose today on Chris Rose rotation. And, you know, a couple, as I said, there's a lot to unpack. Caleb Joseph will join us in a few minutes to do that. But a couple of things immediately come to mind. You know, look, this is Vladdy's contractual status. Look, I've said it. Everybody's said it. Everybody's written it. Whether or not the front office wanted to hear it or wants to hear it. This was destined to become the story the second the Toronto Blue Jays fell out of reasonable postseason contention. It just was. Not having Vladdy or Bo signed long term. This was predictable. I mean, I was saying this was going to happen 5 years ago. So I'm not surprised we are where we are right now. It's funny, Chris Bassitt talking about Vladdy playing third base. Listen, I'm of the belief that it's stupid to play Vladdy at third base. But Chris Bassitt did kind of remind me that when Alex Anthopoulos scouted Vladimir Guerrero Jr., he literally did not have a position. His best position was bat. And Alex Anthopoulos said to him, well, what position do you want to play? And Vladdy said, I like playing third. Okay, so he became a third baseman. Later moved off to first. So all that as Vladdy background. We've said that both Barker, myself, and again, other people as well, it's pretty clear Vladdy wants to sign here. Does he want to sign here for half of what he'd get in the open market? No, of course not. Obviously, he's not going to do that. He's going to want market value. The question is, does this front office, does it want to give Vladdy that contract? I don't know. I don't know where the delay is in all this. But my sense is the delay is not on the part of Vladdy's people. So that deals with Vladdy and Chris Bassitt talking about Vladdy. You know, a couple other things I want to circle back on. One, the comment about Shohei Ohtani, which I know, you know, everybody's. Here's the thing. The only plan B that could conceivably match going out and signing Shohei Ohtani was trading for Juan Soto. Take a look at the Jays minor league system. Best hitter, busted for steroids. Best pitcher, hurt again. Second best pitcher, hurt again. There was not enough depth in this minor league system to make a trade for Juan Soto, for 1 year of Juan Soto. Perhaps we know the San Diego Padres who had Juan Soto. We know they were interested in Vladdy. But I wouldn't trade 2 years of Vladdy for 1 year of Juan Soto. So I don't know. I don't know where the Jays matched up with San Diego. They didn't have the pieces that but trade Bo Bichette. Tell you what, the Padres wouldn't take Bo Bichette. They've got 8 shortstops. They literally have 7 or 8 shortstops playing positions around the field. They don't need Bo. They could take Vladdy. So I'm going to throw that out there. This idea that the Jays, that there was an easy pivot. And I'll look at the free agents that are out there. You saw Cody Bellinger this weekend. Cody Bellinger float your boat? I don't know. I mean, there wasn't a surefire option in free agency to match what Shohei Ohtani was going to give you. And beyond that, the Jays didn't have an ability to make the type of trades you need to make to bring in a quality hitter. So they settled for, Kevin Kiermaier's of the world again, the Justin Turners of the world, the IKFs. So that's my response to what Chris Bassitt has said. Now, as to his talking, his point about a bunch of things going on with this organization that it would take 45 minutes to clear up. It's clear. It's clear that this season hasn't gone the way the front office wanted it to go. It hasn't gone the way the players wanted it to go. Hasn't gone it the way Barker wanted it to go. It sure as hell hasn't gone the way I wanted it to go. Probably hasn't gone the way you wanted it to go. But hearing Chris Bassitt say what he said, understanding that he is a guy who doesn't say something by mistake. There's a reason for him saying what he said. Makes me really, really wonder what the response of this front office and what the response of this manager will be. I want to bring in our Blue Jay Central analyst, Caleb Joseph, into the conversation. Caleb, thanks for joining us, or joining me, because Barker's off. What a day for Barker to take off. This is like right in Barker's wheelhouse. On a scale of 1 to 10, complete, total, utter crap storm, or just kind of a veteran pitcher, kind of ornery because things aren't going well and he probably didn't sign up for this. Where would you put this? Where would you put this statement, this comment from Chris Bassitt? Is it more old guy angry, or hey, there's a real issue here?
Yeah, I think it's right in the middle, Jeff, to be perfectly honest with you. I think Bassitt is that stage in his career where he wants to win, and he's on the back end of it, and he's a competitor. I think he probably was hoping maybe he was dealt to a contender, to a winner, to go try and win a World Series. And there's also part of me that probably thinks that it's the other way as well, that he does enjoy being a Toronto Blue Jay. And, fingers start pointing when things go badly. And I remember being on a team very similar to this team, high expectations, did not meet it. And it took a minute. It took 3 or 4 or 5 months, but the fingers finally started getting pointed. And then everyone is CYA, cover your you-know-what mode. And I'd put it right in the middle. This is what happens when there are great expectations and they are totally not met. But there is a situation where at some point you need to be a professional. And I don't think kind of what he said aired out the dirty laundry, so to speak. He admitted that the Blue Jays have problems. And I think anyone that has followed this team longer than 6 months realizes there's some real issues going on, whether it's who they've signed, how they evaluate those signings, how they evaluate lineup construction, how they do this, how they do that. That's obvious. And so I don't have a problem necessarily with it in that sense, because he's basically stating the obvious. But you just don't see this from players very often. I remember But in this day and age with so much social media, you just don't hear it very much blatantly out in the open. You hear guys talking about the disappointment and their own personal struggles, but rarely do you hear a player commenting on his opinions on the inabilities or transgressions of the front office. That is where I think the game is slowly starting to trend because there's so much information out there.
How does John Schneider, let me rephrase that. Does John Schneider or Ross Atkins need to, quote unquote, handle this?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on if there were conversations held before the season. We're not privy to exactly kind of what's gone on. And let's just say that you and I are friends, Jeff. And if I tell you, hey, I'm going to pick you up at 3 p.m., we're going to go have some ice cream, and then we're going to have a good old time watching the Blue Jays. And I don't show up at 3 o'clock. I show up at 5 o'clock. And instead of going to get ice cream, I take you down to the street meat, which is still okay, but it's not ice cream. And we get,
I'm not certain I like where this is going, Caleb.
And then instead of going to the Blue Jays game, we go to the Leafs game. You'd be kind of totally caught off guard because you had an expectation of one thing or the other.
Yes.
And there is a possibility that there were conversations after last year because much of the same issues were had by the Blue Jays last year in that the offense just wasn't capable. The pitching was absolutely there. They had a tremendous bullpen that was probably willing and capable of winning playoff games for them, and they just could not score runs. And so if you are a veteran player and you see the makeup of the team, that kind of the core, which I will add a couple other different pieces like a Bassitt, like a Brios, like a Gosman, is still intact, and you kind of run it back, rinse and repeat with the same old strategy in terms of mixing and matching different players, and then you don't do enough in the offseason to kind of build that bullpen, continue to build it up. If I am Chris Bassitt, I'm kind of ticked off because I may have been told one thing and it didn't happen. And so we're not privy if that has happened. But if it has, then I totally understand where he and maybe some others would be really frustrated. So I guess the question is, do they have to have a conversation? Well, if you know that you didn't get it done and kind of come through with what you were not promised, but you had conversations with other players, then I think the onus is, on the front office to just get it done. And, but again, all of this is out because you speak publicly about front office decisions when never was this a thing. You never had those conversations. Those used to be fireable offenses. When you started talking about your boss, that usually ended up getting you fired. And I certainly never did that because I was never guaranteed a roster spot.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there have been seasons where things haven't. This is probably going to surprise people to think that everything's gone great since 2015. But I mean, there were seasons. There was one where Alex Anthopoulos was absolutely not trashed, but really criticized by Casey Janssen when he was with the Blue Jays because he didn't make any moves at the trade deadline. We know that the Jose Bautista and Edwin, I mean, their careers in Toronto ended. I mean, there were indications, certainly in the case of Jose Bautista, that there might have been some stresses with the front office there. Same with Josh Donaldson. I mean, a lot of this stuff happens just as a matter of course. I referred in the start of the show, Caleb, 2009, when Cito Gaston took over from John Gibbons as manager, the first time Gibbons was manager of the Blue Jays. And, Vernon Wells, Roy Halladay, Aaron Hill, Rod Barajas, they all went public with criticism of Cito Gaston. And I can remember Ken Rosenthal and Shai Davidi writing stories. And the players asked for a clubhouse meeting in Baltimore on the final weekend of the season with Paul Beeston, who was then the president. Cito didn't get fired, but J.P. Ricciardi got fired a couple of days later as GM. And those are the only... I'm not going from here to there necessarily, but those are kind of the only sort of public... the only criticisms I can think of, the only situations that became so obvious to everybody that it really did become an issue. And I guess for a lot of us, looking at how last season ended with the decision to pull Jose Barrios out of the game and looking at the dueling news conferences and all that, like I don't know how you respond to this. And I think you're right. I think if you go back to what Chris Bassitt said before the trade deadline, if you remember, and I know you do because we talked about this, he was asked after a game, what are your goals for the rest of the year? And he said, I want to pitch. I want to pitch in the playoffs, which to me essentially was saying trade my ass because this team isn't going to the playoffs. So my concern here, Caleb, is this is a guy who's under contract for next year. This is a guy who has a platform, right? He has a platform in the Chris Rose rotation. A lot of players listen to that. And I mean, good luck. You know, if I'm a free agent and the Blue Jays call me, you know who the first person I'm going to call is? I'm going to say, Seabass, like, give me some info on this. That would really concern me.
Yeah, it is something that you absolutely have to kind of nip in the bud as it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think you kind of let this season play out, the frustrations and emotions. And remember, we sometimes think it's about the last 3 or 4 months. Goodness, Bassitt could be upset going all the way back since the first day he was a Blue Jay. Who knows? That just stuff starts to build. And I'll tell you what, we didn't hear very much from players about how last year ended. And knowing Chris Bassitt and the warrior that he is and the starting pitcher that goes out there with no excuses that he typically does and watches a teammate get pulled out of a game that he was absolutely dominating. It wasn't his start, but I guarantee you that chapped him just as bad as it chapped Barrios. And so there's a lot of emotion that just start to come out when you feel like it's an easy target to go. Things that fester for a while and fester and fester and fester. And I don't think Bassett's the only one. You can just sense that the guys there are really wanting to go, and they seem like they might be stuck in a hamster wheel that just keeps turning around and around and around. That might be the best way to describe it, is they want to run, but it seems to me like they're losing hope that the crew that they have doesn't have the appropriate supplemental pieces to take it to the next step. You heard what he said. It takes 3 or 4 superstars. And so, I mean, there's a point. He obviously thinks that there needed to be more. And I heard you kind of, when I got patched in right at the beginning, that they couldn't pivot. And you're exactly right. They were stuck in a position where they couldn't trade for Juan Soto because they didn't have the prospects, and maybe he wouldn't have even been on the Blue Jays' radar necessarily, just because of what they would have had to give up. So there's a position where you don't have the prospects to really do any sort of big trade. You have $700 million possibly, or whatever the number would have been for Ohtani, but he said protecting other players. And I think what he's trying to say, if I'm taking a stab, is he probably loved playing with IKF. He probably loves playing with Kiermaier. He probably loves playing with Turner, but he wants a donkey.
Yep.
He wanted a big guy, and not just one, but 2. And so when you go back, well, did the decisions maybe not to sign Simeon, was that even a possibility? You trade Lourdes Gurriel Jr., you trade Teoscar Hernandez. So it might not just be this season, but looking back, how years of decisions start to unfold, and you see the fruits of like 3 or 4 different years of decisions, and how this starts to kind of play itself out. Because the Blue Jays knew who was a free agent going into this season a long time ago. So it didn't sneak up on them, No. So these are, they're always foresighting and they're always projecting. So they should have seen that the free agent hitting class was incredibly weak, knowing their chances to get Ohtani, even if they pushed the budget pretty high, was pretty low.
I want to move on a little bit. Are you surprised Joey Votto's not up here today? Play the Reds?
A little bit,
I wonder if Joey is.
This is the worst ankle sprain I've ever seen in my life. I will say this. I bet there was probably something going on with Votto that earlier on in the season, that if he probably didn't feel like he could truly come up and really make an impact, that he was not going to be a 625 OPS guy, a 725. Right. But I think if he was going to be and felt like he was going to be around the 800s and really, truly help the team, I think there's probably some sort of underground handshake deal, that there was respect mutually between both the front office and Votto, that he would let them know. And whether it was just a delayed injury, reoccurring soreness, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not sure he ever really kind of got to that position where he felt like he could absolutely, truly make a difference. And that probably goes more to him being a professional, because he could have said he was, even though he wasn't. But knowing Votto just a little bit, he probably didn't feel like he was truly ready. And now it's a weird part in the season where you're obviously trying to take a look at a lot of the younger guys. And so it would be more of a personal thing for Votto, and he never seems like that kind of guy. So a very weird situation. I just don't see him coming up just to say, hey, I played one game for the Toronto Blue Jays. I mean, maybe game 162, like maybe if that's kind of what he wants to do. But coming up now and kind of playing a couple months doesn't really make sense. But I wouldn't rule it out like very, very late in the season.
I have one final question for you, because I do want to leave on on something of a positive. Watching Bowden Francis, understanding that the quality of competition. I mean, it's not like he's, it's not like he was carving up the Orioles or the Yankees or whomever. But watching him pitch yesterday, watching his last two starts, have the Jays found a part of their rotation for next year?
Yeah, you have to think about it that way. You have to consider that. I've been saying this for a while. You have to have key contributors at the minimum so that you can start to spread out a lot of the salary for their needs next year. They have a ton of needs. They have massive amount of needs. And I don't think that one of their needs truly needs to be another starter, especially if Bowden Francis keeps doing what he's doing. I think the biggest thing that he's been able to do is realize that he is a massive human and he can pitch with an edge. Nobody's your friend out there. It's either my money or your money. And you're going out there, you are a bulldog. Pitch to the stature that you stand on the mound at. And I think incorporating that two-seam was massive for him. I talked to Pete Walker in LA about this, just getting something to kind of move into righties to start to protect more of his breaking ball and more of the fastball up. We know he likes to throw it up, but when you throw a two-seamer on the inner half that has enough action, which I thought had tremendous action considering it was the first game he had really thrown it in, and it's actually a one-seamer Marcus Stroman grip that he typically throws, and it had great action. And then you follow that with the split behind it. Now you have two pitches on the arm side of his delivery that really make left-handers respect that down and away portion and make right-handers respect that arm side in hard portion. And I feel like he was a comfortable at bat. He was way too comfortable. The stuff isn't elite, but it's good enough for him to be able to be a viable fifth starter, in my opinion, in the big leagues. And he used that two-seamer to really back off the righties. He got a ton of jam jobs, and granted, not tremendously good offenses, but you still have to make the pitches. And I'm more or less looking at the location and the movement, and it was impressive. The split, the more that he threw that four-seam fastball and got his hand in that position, the split was absolutely right behind it. And we know Kevin Gausman's on the team, and being a starter, I guarantee you Bowden Francis is asking him 1,000,001 questions about that pitch. But the start in Anaheim, especially, him throwing so many fastballs, it put his hand in the perfect position to let go of that split. Threw a career high in splits against the Cubs. And, yeah, there's something there. I'd love to see it kind of continue and see it against really good offenses. But I think the building blocks of having a potential fifth starter in-house at the minimum is something the Blue Jays can be excited about.
Caleb, you've been really generous with your time as always. Thanks so much for doing this, my friend. Be well.
All right. You got it. Good luck. Hey, enjoy your time off, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, all I need is Chris Bassitt to go on Chris Rowe's podcast, and I'll be able to pull this off. Thanks, man. Be well.
You got it. See you. Bye.
Caleb Joseph, our Blue Jays Central analyst. A reminder, should have mentioned this, but I came in hot about the Bassitt thing. 7:07 is the first pitch tonight. The Reds are in town to take on the Jays. Kevin Gausman will be going for his 100th career win. And as Caleb said, it'll be interesting to see if Kevin Gausman has any thoughts on what Chris Bassitt had to say after Kevin Gausman has finished pitching tonight. Again, this is when a veteran feels the need to say something like this, there's a reason for it. And I'm not going to put words into Chris's mouth, but I'd be intrigued to know. Whether or not he gave his teammates a heads up that, hey, I'm going to try I'm going to try to say something about what's going on here because somebody's got to say something about what's going on here. Chrid Welsh is a former big league pitcher. He is Bally Sports Cincinnati Reds host. No Joey Votto as far as we know, but the Reds are in town. They're bringing Ellie De La Cruz with him. He's kind of a big deal. We'll talk to Chris Welsh about the Reds. It's Blair and Barker on Sportsnet 590 The Fan and Sportsnet. All right, welcome back to Blair and Barker. That's just Blair today. Barker's off for the week, although he may be making an appearance. 7:07 will be the first pitch tonight at the Rogers Center. The Jays taking on the Cincinnati Reds in the first of a 3-game series. The Jays coming off a 1-0 win over the Chicago Cubs yesterday. Well, all you need to know about the Blue Jays season is I listened to the Apple TV, or watched and listened to the Apple TV broadcast of the game on Friday, and much was made of the fact that the Chicago Cubs were talking about how happy they were to be in the soft part of their schedule. So there you go, the Toronto Blue Jays being viewed by some teams as part of the soft spot of their schedule. The Cincinnati Reds haven't been to the playoffs since 2020. They are 6 games out of the wild card right now. It's kind of an odd season in a lot of ways. I think Jeff Passan pointed this out on Twitter yesterday. There's an awful lot of teams that are still in the playoff race, and frankly, there are a lot of teams that are going to be in the playoff race for quite some time. I wonder about the Reds. I wonder if this season can be a success for the Cincinnati Reds if they don't make the playoffs. Let's bring in Chris Welsh. He is Bally Sports Cincinnati Reds host, former MLB pitcher. Chris, thanks for joining us today, or joining me. Good to see you as always, my friend. We go back to my days in Montreal. And, it's always good to see you. You're looking good, man.
Well, thanks, Jeff. You know, we go so far back that our hair was a different color back in those good old days.
Our hair certainly was a different color, although I might add that yours is just as long as it was back then. So keep it up.
Well, I haven't had a cut. It just stopped growing on me. But it's good to see that they're keeping some old guys in the game. I'm happy to be coming back every year, and it's good to see you still active and going at it.
Yeah, it's really great to see you. Hey, I'm going to ask you that question because look, going into the year, Kevin Barker and myself were talking about the Reds, and I kind of had the Reds down as a bit of a dark horse team. I will admit I love watching this team. I love watching Ellie De La Cruz, and they're almost a team that I find myself. I want them to make the playoffs because I just think they'd be so much fun. Do they have to make the playoffs this year for this season to be considered a success?
Well, I hope not. You go back a couple of years, they lost 100 games. Last year, they were out of the playoffs by 1 game. They were 2 games over, or 1 game over 500, I believe, last season. So, yeah, the expectations were higher this year that they were going to be better. And going into spring training, they had a team that looked like they were going to be, the foundation would be there. But the problem is, they had some injuries early on. Matt McClain, really a lot of people don't know about him, but he had a very good rookie year last year. And he injured his shoulder, was basically out for the season this year. They may get him back in September. But the fact is that he was the guy that was supposed to hold it all together and play second base alongside Ellie De La Cruz. And when he was injured, they had to start flipping guys into different positions. And then they realized that your sophomore season in the major leagues is more difficult than your rookie season in the major leagues. And things have just really never gotten to be able to get put together. Injuries have sidetracked this ball club. And when you're looking at a $90 million payroll, you just don't have the kind of depth that you can call up to replace that.
What, to your mind, aside from good health, let's assume that I think most successful teams need to have good health to be successful. What is the thing that you think is the next step for this club in terms of acquiring players or filling a certain positional need?
I really believe that on a winning ball club, you have to have at least 3 players on your team that are star to superstar caliber players that you can depend on, that those guys, when they go into slumps, they're not going to go 0 for 30. they're going to still carry the ball club even when they're going through some bad times. And when you don't have those kind of players on your roster playing every day, you're asking players who've never done it before to be the man, and you can't do that. And I think that's what's happened here with the Reds. They've gotten guys that have tried to do too many things. Ellie De La Cruz is a great example of that. I don't know if there's anybody in baseball that's got more talent than this young man, but he's 22 years old. And because he can run as fast as anybody and throw as hard as anybody and hit the ball as hard as anyone, everybody expects him to be, Andre Dawson, switch hitter, combined with Tim Raines all together. And you don't do that when you're 22. And I think that's where it is. You need to have some players that you can depend on, superstar type players that can get out there every day and get it done. And the Reds don't have any of those.
Back when Vladimir Guerrero Sr. was breaking into the game and Felipe Alou was his manager when he's breaking into the majors, Felipe talked about the need for star players to manage their talent. And part of his thinking was, he'd watch Vladdy run to first base, and it was like a wild bull. Like everything was max effort. He would stomp on first base. He didn't arrive on first base. Has Ellie taken steps towards doing that? We see the first to home stuff with, the electrical aspect of his game. But Chris, has he also taken steps towards understanding that there is a time to rein it in a bit?
I think so, but that comes with repetitions. It comes with game situations. It comes with playing big games under the spotlight. And I think he's capable of all that. But, you just can't expect a young kid that can kind of rush through the minor leagues and he gets pushed up here because his physical ability is so good compared to everybody else that, where else is he going to fine tune his game except at the big league level? Now, if he had a couple of superstar caliber players playing around him that had been all-stars in the past and that can really settle him down, he would be much better off, I think. But because it's difficult for a young player to listen to a coach and have him tell him, and then have it resonate the same as the guy that's playing third base next to him or second base next to him, and kind of talk him through situations. So I think that's where the Reds are right now. They're looking for a couple of guys that can be studs in their lineup, but also help the young players like Ellie De La Cruz. You've got Matt McLean coming along, some other young men out there as well that need mentoring from within, not necessarily from only the coaching staff.
I lost a bet because I had today as the day that Joey Votto was going to be called up by the Blue Jays. I figured, if you go through this whole thing, what better time to call him up than against the Reds? Now, Joey Votto's turned into the international man of mystery around here. Look, you've seen this guy a lot. Are you surprised? Because, look, I take him at his word that he wants to come back and play. But are you surprised that he has spent this year, that he so feels a desire to come back and play in the majors, that he's spent this year in Dunedin and now at Buffalo trying to get back here? Does that surprise you?
No. Joey Votto is the most driven ball player that I've ever seen, without a question. He's worked his way. He's a self-made man. He's not the guy with the greatest talent out there. Yes, he's strong. He's got great hand-eye coordination, but his real talent is his dedication to working harder and learning more about baseball than the pitcher that he's facing that night. And I think that's why Votto is just so driven to be he wants to be the main guy in a ballpark every time he steps up to the plate. And I'm not surprised by that. I'm disappointed that it hasn't happened, really. I think a lot of people had this date circled, just like you did, Jeff. But I'm really saddened, really, by the way it's gone for Joey Votto, because he needed an exit from baseball with a lot of fanfare, not to kind of disappear into the low minor leagues in the back of a bus. So I know that he'll eventually get his when it comes time. But I was really hoping that he would, get down there, stay healthy, and hit the way the Joey Votto can hit and be up in the big leagues. I'm disappointed that we don't see him there this weekend.
Chris, it is really good to see you again, my friend. Thanks so much. Be well.
All right,
and we'll touch base.
Okay, buddy.
Take care. Chrid Welsh is the Valley Sports Cincinnati Reds host, former Major League pitcher, former Montreal Expos. Well, it goes back a long ways with Chris, who's really turned into a fine broadcaster. Again, 7:07 will be the first pitch tonight as the Reds take on the Toronto Blue Jays. Kevin Gausman against Julian Aguilar. Gausman going for his 100th MLB win. He's 99-99 through 322 games. And, of course, we will be interested in seeing whether or not Kevin Gausman has anything to say regarding the comments that Chris Bassitt made on the Chris Rose rotation earlier today. And listen, Chris Bassitt's words carry a lot of weight in that clubhouse. So do Kevin Gausman's. And both of them are under contract through next year. And, as I said a little earlier, you can take Chris Bassitt's comments pretty much any way you want it. I can't imagine Chris Bassitt, his comments suggesting that there's a fair amount wrong with the way this organization goes about its business. And I'm talking about the baseball business more than anything else. You could take those, those arguments will be received by people based on what their preconceived notions are. If you believe that the Jays front office is a tire fire and a mess, you're going to look at Chris Bassitt's comments. You're going to say, look, there's a guy in the clubhouse. That's not Blair Barker saying that. That's a guy in the clubhouse. If you've been around for a while, maybe you look at it as, a guy who kind of unhappy with the way things have gone. A guy who I'm not going to speak for Chris Bassitt, but I'm willing to bet that Chris Bassitt thought there was a pretty good chance he was going to be traded at the trade deadline. And this is a guy who's back next year. So maybe Chris Bassitt, we're looking at it. Is this Chris Bassitt saying I want out, or is this Chris Bassitt saying, look, I'm back next year, right? I signed up for this. I'm back next year. I expect things to be done better next year. I expect a better team. I expect more support for Vladdy. So it's like anything else. We'll need to see this play out. We'll need to see what follows in terms of comments from the front office. Of course, the front office is not obligated to say anything. They're not obligated to, and they're not obligated to trade Chris Bassitt. They don't have to say anything. They can wait until the end of the year and address this in their end-of-year media availability. John Schneider, I don't know. We'll see if John Schneider said anything today about it or not. I don't have that handy right now. But, we'll wait and see. Shai Davidi joins us at 5:30, and we'll get the latest from him. There is a little bit of news about Bo Bichette. And no, it's not that Bob Nightingale wrote today that Bo Bichette's time with the Blue Jays is basically over, that he wants to move on from the Blue Jays, that the Blue Jays want to move on from him. The story is he plans to leave the Blue Jays after next season. I don't think that comes as a shock to anybody. Again, we're at the point where both of these guys, Bo and Vladdy, are a year away from free agency, and this is the bed you made if you're the Blue Jays. Now you're lying in it. Most importantly, though, for the immediate future, it appears as if Bo Bichette, is close to returning to action, at least doing baseball duties. I believe he's a couple of days away from that. He's been out for the longest time with a calf injury, and I think you've heard Kevin Barker talk about calf injuries. Our most current memory of a calf injury having a serious impact on a player was of course Josh Donaldson. And my friend Mr. Barker will is quite often talked about how much of an impact that would have on Bo, given how he swings. So yeah, if nothing else, it would be great to see Bo back. But again, this is it's going to be a long September. It's really going to be a long September, and you're almost at the point where you wonder, are we seeing the final days of Bo Bichette or Vladdy here with the Blue Jays? The Jays seem inclined to run it back. Again, both Bo and Vladdy are under contract for next year, so they can't. They can't. I guess they could theoretically ask for a trade, but one, there's no indication that they would, and two, the Jays could basically say, "Screw you." That ain't happening. But it's going to be in some ways, an eventful stretch drive for this team, even though they are far out of it. Meantime, I would suggest we just enjoy some baseball. I'm looking forward to seeing Vladdy try to finish the year on a roll. I'm looking forward to the visiting teams that come in. I'm really excited about seeing L.A. De La Cruz. Again, it's baseball, so it's not the worst thing in the world by any stretch of the imagination. The starters for the rest of the series, the Reds have not announced their starter for Game 2. Jose Barrios will start for the Blue Jays. Nick Martinez will start against Yariel Rodriguez in the third game of this 3-game series. And the Jays have had a fair amount of success against the Reds in the past. Something to keep an eye on tonight. We talked about this with Chris Welsh. The Reds lead Major League Baseball in stolen bases, 168. Their stolen base percentage is second, so keep an eye on that tonight with Kevin Gossman on the mound. We'll see. We'll see where this goes. Well, this is good news. We talked about how we wanted to end with a little bit of optimism when we talked to Caleb Joseph. Bowden Francis has been named AL Player of the Week. Hands up if you had that in your 2024 bingo card. 2 starts, 14 innings pitched, 15 strikeouts, 1 earned run, no walks. 32% strike percentage for Bowden Francis, and yesterday was terrific. And again, we talk about the opposition, and I struggle with this a bit because I know Barker talks about how Vladdy's role has come with the team out of contention, and the pressure's essentially off Vladdy. But I still think, there's still that you against me aspect of the game, right? There may not be any pressure on the Blue Jays in terms of the standings, but I've got to think when Vladdy goes to the plate against Kyle Hendricks or whoever, there's still a certain amount of pressure. You want to come through. You want to do something. So I'll say that with Bowden Francis as well. We can sit here and say, well, it was the Angels and it was the Cubs. But as Caleb said, you look at Bowden Francis. Physically, he looks the part. He's throwing the 2-seamer now. He's got and if he can come good, if he and Yariel Rodriguez can finish the year on the uptick, there is a way going forward next year, because this team has to do a lot of stuff, but there is a way going forward where you perhaps don't have to focus on the starting rotation as much as you thought you would. So there's something else to watch down the stretch. Jon Morosi is the MLB Network's MLB insider. He's in Williamsport for the Little League World Series. We'll talk to him about Chris Bassitt's comments, Bo Bichette's future, all of that ahead. It's Blair and Barker on Sportsnet. All right, welcome back to Blair and Barker, or Blair sans Barker. Sans being French for without Barker. I do have the Hazel May bobblehead here, though, so I'm not alone in the room. Barker will be back next week. He may make a guest appearance this week. We'll bring him in if something. Well, we'll bring him in if there, another crisis emerges or something something along that line. 7:07 will be the first pitch tonight. Jays and Reds open their 3-game series. A little bit of news to get through. Bowden Francis has been named AL Player of the Week after 2 really good starts. Bo Bichette is expected to start running the next 2 to 3 days. He is down in Dunedin. He's already doing defensive drills and doing some hitting as well. And the Jays claimed a left-handed pitcher, Easton Lucas, off waivers from the Tigers. They've optioned him to AAA. Spit it out, Jeff. They've optioned him to AAA. And they have moved Alek Manoah to the 60-day DL, which is simply a paper move. So don't read anything into it. Because I know y'all like to read into stuff. Don't read anything into that. Let's bring in Jon Morosi of the MLB Network. He's in lovely Williamsport for the Little League World Series. So I got a story to tell you. I'm not going to mention the name of the writer, John.
Okay.
But it's part of the folklore of the Montreal Gazette. I used to work at the Montreal Gazette. Much beloved writer gets an assignment to go to the Little League World Series. Gets down, checks into his hotel room, calls the news desk and says, I got a bit of an issue here. What's the issue? He said, well, the Little League World Series isn't on. News desk says, it's on every year. He said, I asked the front desk. They don't know anything about it. And the desk editor says, I mean, there's Wire story here talking about it. And it says Williamsport. Pause. Oh, Williamsport. I'm in Williamsburg, Virginia. Anyhow, there you go. True story. Not that you would ever make that mistake, Mr. Morosi.
That is a story. Well done, my friend. The name of said writer shall be known but to you. That is an excellent story.
Much beloved. God love him. One of my favorite people in the world. And because of the person he is, it makes the story even better because it would just, anyhow. I had something like that happen when I was in Germany. I was covering bobsled. I went to Altenberg instead of Altenberg for a bobsled race. Same thing happened. I got into my hotel. There's nothing going on. I don't know what the hell's gone on. I screwed up. Then I call my travel agent and I say, and she said, oh, well, there's 2. There's an Altenberg, B-U-R-G, and an Altenberg, B-E-R-G. And I was in the wrong place. So it does happen. Anyhow, that's more. I know that's more than you need to know about that. Hey, what's the vibe like at the Little League World Series? We watched the game last night. Shout out to the Canadian team for having all that fun with Juan Soto. That's kind of a cool event, isn't it? I've never covered it, and yet people I know have covered the Little League World Series say that it's just. I think so many of us, John, when we started out as writers, probably started out covering kids' sports or high school sports or college sports, and it kind of takes you back to its roots. And everybody that does it says it's just a blast.
Oh, it is. And I think that you're exactly right that it brings you back to the essence of who you were when you were 12. And if you think about all of us that love sports, what our fandom and our passion for the sport was when we were 12 years old, that is what the Little League World Series is everywhere, all around you. And then on top of that event, you place Aaron Judge walking through the crowds and signing autographs. And I actually asked Aaron after the game last night because I got to tell you, Jeff, I was walking about 15 feet behind Aaron as he was walking into Alameda Stadium yesterday. And there were the barriers on either side of him where fans were crowding 3 and 4 deep, just screaming and asking for autographs. And Jeff, I've been able to see a lot in the 20 years I've covered sports. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like that or heard anything quite like that. That really stood out to me, how passionate the fans were, how in awe. I saw just like young kids almost crying, just yearning to be able to get an autograph signed by their favorite player. And then grown-ups, just the same like manic energy. And Aaron basically said it was like, they made me feel like I was the Beatles, is what he said. So it was something else. And there's a reason why, Jeff, a lot of the other special event games that baseball has played,
Field of Dreams, Rickwood Field. They played the game at Fort Bragg years ago. Next year they're going to go to Bristol. They've been to Mexico City. They've been to London. The one that has stood the test of time and is in the rotation every single year is this one. Yeah. Because even though for some of us, and I consider myself very fortunate, I've actually covered all 7 of them to this point, which has been pretty cool. I love it because it's almost like you're watching your favorite movie with some people who have never seen it before, and you're like looking at them to see their reaction at the big parts. Mm-hmm. I get to live the weekend that way and get to see when you're covering it with people that have never done it before, when you walk up the hill and the team is all walking up and there's autograph seekers everywhere and names are getting shouted. And Garrett Cole was in awe when I talked to him yesterday. You very rarely see, and it's true, by the way, Jazz Chisholm actually said this, that he found a player that he liked watching and that they're now friends and following on Instagram. And Jeff, you've lived this because of all your years of covering baseball. It's hard to describe to people who don't spend their days in major league clubhouses how much major league players get into the Little League World Series and find favorite teams. Even if they're not from that exact country or region, they'll find a team with a kid that they like, and they'll be cheering for that team, and they're just cheering in that clubhouse all before their own game. It is a really unique phenomenon this time of year.
You know, our friend Jeff Passan sent out a tweet yesterday that it kind of made me chuckle, showing the best dozen records in Major League Baseball, the best run differentials. And his point was this: the best team in MLB is on pace for 95 wins, right? And the last year we had a team that didn't win 100, or there wasn't a 100-win team, was 2014. This is a year after we've seen a 90-win wildcard team face an 86-win wildcard team in the World Series. And it looks like this thing is wide open. I mean, when you look at run differential, the Yankees' run differential is plus 116. It's the best in baseball. The last time the top run differential in baseball was less than 230 was 2014, and it's just half of that at the moment. Is this good? It is like I understand parity's fine. You can sell parity. It keeps fans coming out. But on balance, is this good for baseball?
No, Jeff, that's a great question. I think that the super teams on some level are fun. And I guess it almost you almost go back to when the Golden State Warriors were a super team and really any team LeBron was playing on. Did we feel as though the Heat during that era was good for the NBA? Were the Patriots of Brady and Belichick good for the NFL? I think that there is hope in a lot of markets where maybe there hasn't been in a while. And I agree with Jeff's premise that, and obviously the numbers back it up, but it seems as though all the teams that I'm fortunate enough to watch as part of our MLB Network package, I see a lot of the Phillies, a lot of the Yankees, a lot of the Dodgers. It's rare that I see this many quality teams in big markets who have this many flaws. And I think that's right. What Jeff's stat is basically supporting, that the Dodgers, as dominant as their 1-2-3 hitters are, would anybody be surprised that they lose in the first round? No, because first of all, it's happened the last 2 years. And second of all, the reason that it happened each of the last 2 years, a shortage of healthy pitching, is manifestly happening again, like right in front of our faces. Glass now, Yamamoto, up and down the list, all the guys that are injured or ineffective. It is a wild time right now to be a favored team in baseball because they do have flaws. Even the Orioles, look at the struggles of Craig Kimbrell and how that has changed, I think, the tenor around that ball club. So I think Jeff's stat is spot on. And I would remind everybody that in that year, 2014, we had two wildcard teams meet in what became a thrilling 7-game World Series. That was decided with the tying run at third base in the bottom of the ninth inning in Game 7 in Kansas City. So you can get random and surprising matchups, and I think it does feel, Jeff, that we could be headed for you name it, Diamondbacks, Royals, World Series, Padres, Royals, World Series. Just completely unexpected, but that's what the flavor seems to be right now.
Now, the Braves have just found out that they're going to be without Austin Riley, I believe, for the rest of the year. If I'm
A
not
fracture, that was right. That was announced, and I don't know that we've seen an official timetable on that. But when you're dealing with a fracture and
right.
it's this late in the season, I would say it's very iffy as to whether or not he's going to be able to play again this season.
Yeah, and this just kind of reinforces, doesn't it? When it's so balanced right now, injuries really do play an even bigger factor. And I'm just wondering, from your point of view, if you are the Atlanta Braves, John, at this point, do you just not that you throw your hands up? I mean, the trade deadline's passed anyhow, but how do you? Is it still easy to tell your fans, to sell your fans on the idea that injuries have cost us this year at a time when so many teams are contending? Is it easy to sell your fans on that?
Right. Well, I think that I would say this, that the Braves are operating within a very unique reality in that they have won the World Series within the last several years. They're missing the reigning MVP for the rest of the year in Acuna already. And I think that this core, you've got some older guys like Charlie Morton is getting towards the end of his career. Max Fried's going to be a free agent after the season is over. Brian Snitker is one of the more senior managers in the game. Maybe he wants to manage 1, 2, 3 more years. But it is kind of a shorter term deal. And by the way, their farm system, because of all the trades that Alex has made, isn't necessarily in the strongest shape, at least relative to other teams. Now, here's the amazing thing. Against that entire backdrop, Chris Sale might win the NL Cy Young, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's been that dominant. So it's a really interesting, eclectic blend of players. Olson's had a bit of a down year. Albies has been hurt too. Harris has been hurt at different times. I agree that it's probably not their year. They also are going to host the All-Star game next season, which I'm sure they want to get some momentum towards that. I do think, though, you make a very good point about the trade deadline being passed and the rules having changed to where you can't make trades anymore. Mm-hmm. Now, the one thing you can do is you can sign released players. And the Tigers yesterday just released Gio Urshela. It would not surprise me in the least if Alex signs him for the minimum, because why wouldn't you?
Yep.
He's a credible third baseman, good ball player. Maybe he gets hot in a better environment in Atlanta. But there's that decision about how you play things out and how you handle things. It's almost like the decision's been made for you because you can't really do anything besides sign Urshela for the minimum. And I think that you're setting the baseball fans there certainly are very, very savvy. They've been around winning baseball. They know the odds are stacked against them, especially when you consider how well the Phillies are playing. And the Mets have done a decent job of staying in this race as well. So I do think it's a fairly stinging indictment of how poorly things have gone for the Braves, that against the backdrop that you alluded to with Jeff's tweet, that they're still that far from the division lead in the NL East.
Bob Nightingale reported today that expectations are that Bo Bichette will leave the Blue Jays when he becomes a free agent. Now, I mean, I don't know how. I'm not criticizing Bob or anything. I don't know if that would necessarily qualify as the most startling piece of baseball news. But, look, coupled with what some of Chris Bassitt's comments today and the Chris Rose rotation, coupled with the lack of movement towards signing Vladdy, coupled with the fact that this has just not been a good year for the Blue Jays. It's clearly this is a narrative that, it's going to run for a while. And I'll just ask you, on a percentage basis, 1 to 100, what do you think the percentage is that Bo is with the Blue Jays for opening day next year? Because I'm really beginning to think that it's decreasing. And he's got a contract, so it's not like he can walk in. Theoretically, he could walk in and say, trade me, but they don't have to do that. But what do you think the percentage chances are that he will be with the team next year? And what would the market for him be in the offseason?
Jeff, it's so interesting because I agree that the number is falling. Maybe it's right around 50-50. Maybe it's starting to – I hesitate to say there's a better chance of a trade than not, just because it's really difficult to trade a player who's been this good coming off a year this bad. It just is. And even, let's also be honest here, even when players have good value, it's hard to find a fair trade for them when there's only 1 year left on their deal because there's just not a lot of value. And so it's interesting. Actually, I was reflecting before we started this conversation to make a trade for Bo when he's been down when his value's been down and he's been hurt. You'd almost have to find a team who needed to take a big swing in the same way that the Jays did when they got Tulo, right? Because Tulo that year was hurt too. And it was he had been up and down and was he really himself yet? He certainly wasn't as valuable as he was the previous year when he was basically the best player in baseball for the first half of the 14 season before the Jays got him. And I kind of chuckled and said, someone's going to basically have to make the reverse Tulo trade with the Jays. And who that is, it's an open question. I don't think it would be Alex. That would be interesting if it was. I don't think it will be. I look at a team like the Dodgers. They're clearly still reimagining what their shortstop situation is going to be. They've layered on all these different players. I'm not sure how many of them are going to come back next season, but they might believe that with their team and their process, they could get a better version of Bo. It's going to require, for him to get traded, it's going to require some humility on the part of the Jays to basically say, listen, the fans are probably not going to like this trade because you're going to be trading someone who's been really good and you're almost, by definition, Jeff, not going to get a ton for him, or at least not as much as you could get for him. And that's why I hesitate to say that it's like better than 50-50 because whenever Ross Atkins steps in front of the cameras to explain that trade, it's not going to look good. It's just not. And you could say to Bo, if hypothetically, if he says to the Jays in a meeting at some point, hey, I think it's time for me to move on. The Jays might say, my suggestion to you is to come into camp in awesome shape, have a great first half, and then we'll see. Either you're going to make yourself a ton of money in free agency if you play really well, or if you're playing great and we stink, we'll trade you. I mean, that's going to involve a lot more trust. And I think that's the part, Jeff, that you're alluding to with Bassitt, with maybe what Bo said to Hazel during the season. You're starting to piece it together. And even what Bassitt said about the roof the other day, which was kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. It seems like there's a little bit of a trust deficit. That's going to have to get repaired here. Because if and this is going to take, by the way, exhaustive and detailed communication up and down the organization to get on the same page. And I think what I would say, there are certain things that I think Jays fans should be grateful for, honestly. The amount of spending the team has done, that's a clear positive. The way they've signed pitching, clear positive. But they've also had some failures. We know that. And the way out of this is to be, I think, even increasingly transparent outwardly to the fans, who I think are frustrated. The end of last year was frustrating. The offseason was frustrating. This year has been frustrating. If it's going to be the same group coming back next year, which I think there's a decent chance that it will be in terms of leadership, I do think they owe it, might be a strong word, but I almost feel like it's fair here, a high degree of transparency about what they've seen, what they can do to make a change, because the Yankees aren't going anywhere. Mm-hmm. The Orioles aren't going anywhere. I think at the very least, the fans want to say, what are you going to do to help this team, aside from Vladdy, who's been amazing, be a little more fun for me to fall in love with in 2025? I'm not asking to win the World Series necessarily. I just want this team to be one that I can fall in love with again. And I think that's going to really require, I don't know, salesmanship might be a bit too strong of a term, but marketing, transparency, really strong communication, being a little bit bold and acknowledging the failures and being specific about it, which I think hasn't really happened that much. I think that's going to have to all transpire to get the fans back on the Jays side. At least that's my read on the situation.
Yeah, no, listen, you used the phrase trust deficit. I think that's absolutely where we are with with the fan base and indeed with some of the players. John, as always, it was great of you to join us today. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jeff. Look forward to the next time. And that was a great story about Montreal, by the way. That was excellent.
Take care. Jon Morosi, see you. MLB Network insider and Williamsport for the Little League World Series. Every writer has had something like that happen where they've just made one of those mistakes. And all you can do is laugh about it and hopefully put it in your book at some point. John Schneider is the manager of the Blue Jays. Lots to talk about. Of course, Chris Bassitt had kind of gave his version of the state of the team today in the Chris Rose rotation. Joey Votto, he ain't here. The Reds are here, but there's no Joey Votto. Lots to talk about. This is the manager of the Blue Jays, John Schneider. His media availability just a few minutes ago.
Is there anything off the top today?
Just on Bo and Jordan. They're both in Florida. Bo continuing to progress with baseball stuff, ground balls and swinging in the cage. Hopefully he gets to a running progression in the next 2 to 3 days and kind of go from there. And Jordan feeling better, not throwing yet, but doing the old plyo ball throws to kind of ramp up to get to throwing.
Is there a hope for when Jordan might be able to get back to throwing?
Hopefully within the next week or so. That would be the next possible or the next probable step, and kind of go from there.
Do you think there's enough runway there for him to get back to the big leagues by the end of the year?
I hope so. I think we'll know a lot more once he gets off the mound for the first time and throws his first bullpen, and hopefully kind of put a calendar together. But I would love it if he had the chance to get back here.
I assume Bo's definitely going to need a rehab assignment at some point.
Yeah. I think still, keep him ramping up in Florida, and then as he gets closer, get him back here with us, go through some workouts, and then get on a rehab assignment. It'll be a few games, I think, just because of the time he missed.
With Gosman tonight, it's been kind of interesting to hear him after recent starts, because the results have been great, but he's been saying he's not happy with the way he's pitching.
Yeah.
The lack of swing and miss. So what do you kind of make of the discrepancy between process and results?
Yeah, weird. I mean, Kev, has been so good for so long. I think that, you look up and you see seven scoreless his last outing, and there's still room for improvement, I think, with everything. It shows how good he is and how talented he is, that he can still do what he's doing without this number of strikeouts that we're accustomed to. So I do think kind of the, throwing his sinker is new, and, he's getting some soft contact early and counts on that. And that's led to a little bit of the lack of strikeouts, but still on any given night, he can go out there and punch out 10 or 12. Kind of just depends on what that split's doing.
Yeah, he's kind of gone through the splitter this year where he had the horizontal movement for a while, back to the curve. Are you seeing any reason why he's not getting the swing and miss he usually does?
Not really. I think there was a time where he was kind of battling his delivery a little bit, and working on that in between. When that's on point, he's usually pretty good. And it's such a unique pitch, it's going to kind of have a mind of its own at times. And there was a while too where it wasn't carrying the zone as much as he wanted it to. So again, when his mechanics are on point, I think you see that pitch carry the zone a little bit more and get the swing and miss.
I said after the last one, I'm getting used to being 33. I've never been 33 before. How much of this is just being a vet, having a lot of innings under your belt, maybe learning how to do things a little bit different?
Yeah, that's how pitchers evolve and how they stay good for a long period of time. And, this will be, after the first inning, it's 500 innings with us just in the time that he's been here. And it adds up, So, again, with a lot of these guys, we're watching that as the season goes. But it's every year I feel like when you get to a certain age, you got to kind of reinvent yourself a little bit. And it's definitely been a little bit of that for Kev this year.
Is that kind of an open dialogue, not just with Kev, but with you guys and Jose and with Chris, about just what their workloads look like from here on?
Yeah, no doubt. And they're built up and they're ready for, whatever a regular season and then some would entail. And, we've talked to them quite a bit. And, they know every outing they have. It's, we can say roughly, hey, you got 100 pitches and we're going to see how the game goes. But if there's times where they need to stay in and get us through an inning or get us a win, we do that. And there's times where, we have a comfortable lead, kind of like what we did with Jose in LA. You kind of call it a night then, but they're on board with it and they're ready for anything.
Just during this stretch, especially where you have so many games in a row, would you consider a spot starter or a six-man at any point?
We've talked about a few things. We got the doubleheader in Boston coming up too, so we're being mindful of it. But again, I think with a couple off days, it kind of takes care of that too. or it did. Going forward, there's not many, but we'll continue to talk about it this next turn through.
You and SB go way back to like AA days. You watched him come up this organization. I mean, what do you kind of remember about him and his years with the Blue Jays?
Energy, just a consistent guy. Obviously, he had a great run here, All-Star in 2022. I think the world of him, just as a baseball player and as a person. Watching him grow up and watching him turn into a big leaguer and an all-star was pretty cool. But I just think of his energy and just his love for the game. He was really well liked here. Guys love him here. He's an easy guy to like. So it'll be nice to see him this 3 games. Hopefully he doesn't do anything too good. But I've always thought the world of SB.
I mean this in a really respectful way, but it's not exactly like the toolsiest guy.
Right.
Like, he doesn't have the most like innate, like insane baseball talent. He's
right.
really had to kind of like work for everything. You think about that All-Star year, like he put on a ton of weight and really like upped his power just by doing it.
Yeah, I mean, you think of him, it's kind of like Ernie, where there's a lot of contact and he can handle the bat and he's a really good defender. And to kind of watch him really put his whole offseason into that and to see it, unfold into a regular season was pretty cool. And he's always had to work really hard to get what he wants. And I think that's why he's so well respected and well liked. And it has been cool to kind of watch him grow and just turn into a big leaguer.
Well, there you go. That's John Schneider talking about everything but the story of the day. But anyhow, 7:07 is the first pitch tonight on Sportsnet and Sportsnet 590 The Fan. And it'll be Kevin Gausman going for his 100th career win. And you heard Arden talking to John Schneider about Kevin Gausman. And kind of interesting, Kevin Gausman in the past couple of, and this is something to keep an eye on as we go forward during for the rest of the season. Kevin Gausman has it's something Kevin Barker's talked about. He's he's getting up there in age. He's pitched an awful lot of innings in the majors. And I kind of get the sense we're seeing a bit of a transformation on the part of Kevin Gausman here, and not necessarily significant transformation, but it's something to certainly keep an eye on the rest of the year. If he continues to kind of develops the wrong word. If he continues to try to morph into a little bit of a different pitcher with a little different repertoire. It's going to be fascinating to watch. And again, keep in mind, we've kind of written off 2024, but, Kevin Gausman's under contract. Jose Barrios is under contract for another couple of years. Chris Bassitt is under contract for another year. Yariel Rodriguez is under contract for a couple of years. And Bowden Francis is kind of very quietly, I think, staking a claim to a spot in the rotation next year. So, and this is all good considering the lack of depth the Blue Jays have in their minor league system right now. So, we've talked about how big the shopping list is for this team this year. If they can get their starting pitching lined up, so that moving forward, the focus doesn't have to be on spending money to add to the rotation. That is a massive win for this organization. If they can, if they've got their 5 and all they have to do in the offseason is maybe add a depth arm, if they've got their 5, that just allows them to focus on getting those extra hitters in here that can help Vladdy, and if he's here next year, Bo as well. Shai Davidi is Sportsnet's MLB insider. He spoke to Chris Bassitt today. Chris Bassitt apparently wanting to clarify some of his comments earlier. We'll let Shai do that for him. It's Blair and Barker without Barker on Sportsnet 590 The Fan and Sportsnet. All right, welcome back to Blair and Barker. Well, Blair. Barker is probably painting a deck or something right now if it's not raining. 7:07 will be the first pitch tonight. The Cincinnati Reds in town to take on the Toronto Blue Jays. Lots to talk about with our next guest, so let's get to it right away. He is Shai Davidi, Sportsnet.ca MLB insider. Mr. Davidi, as always, we appreciate your time. So should I be surprised? Now, I understand he's hitting like $171 in AAA, but should I be surprised that Joey Votto isn't up here for this series? Because I, like a lot of people, I kind of thought that, this is kind of a vanity project here. And seems to me if you're going to go through the whole song and dance with Joey Votto, having him up for series against the Reds is kind of a nice touch, no?
Yeah, I think if you're running a baseball team for narrative, then yeah, it should be and sort of, I guess, a poetic justice sense of the universe. This would have been.
I'm a romantic at heart. You know that, don't you?
Clearly, yes. From your disposition speaks of it.
It certainly does.
But I think all along, Joey Votto's been not necessarily driving the process, but like where he's been at and how he's felt has led the decision making. And right now, he's got a 500 OPS or something like that with a bunch of strikeouts at AAA. And I can't imagine that Joey himself would want to come up until he feels he's in a better spot offensively. And for where he's at right now, I mean, he's clearly not where he feels like he needs to be. And so, yes, it would have been great. It would have made a lot of sense. But when I spoke to him in Buffalo, I guess it was about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago now, he said, when I asked him, do you want to try to get back for the Red Series? He said, no, that's not what this is about. I don't care about that series. I want to come back. If I'm going to come back, I need to be a Major League Baseball player and able to contribute like a Major League Baseball player does. And that's the bar that he set for himself. And so until he reaches that, the conversation isn't going to go further. And then trying to say, oh, well, it's a good full circle moment. It really should be, it would be really neat to come back against the Reds and have that moment of completion or whatever you want to attach to it. That just wasn't going to be a consideration for Joey Votto and the Blue Jays.
Look, you certainly know Joey better than I do. Do you think he wants to play next year? Like, do you think? Look, I understand we can't get in his head, but let's be optimists. Let's say he does come up at some point in September, and he looks okay. I mean, it might not be the Joey Votto that we're used to seeing, but he looks like he can kind of hold his own. Do you think there's any way he comes back next year, or do you think this is it, and it's time to move on and wait for that first ballot Hall of Fame nomination?
Well, I tried to press him on that, and he's really not there. And his sole focus right now is on just figuring out what he needs to figure out and getting that feeling and timing and rhythm back at the plate that he's clearly looking for. And then afterwards, ideally he gets up to the major leagues. He can play for his boyhood team and then assess from there. That was at least the sense of where I got from him. Now, is there maybe a part of him that's looking for a better ending to his career than having the Reds not pick up your option and no other team in the majors be interested in you? Maybe that's a piece of it. And then coming back and having a moment with the Blue Jays and at the end of his career and the final jersey that he wears is that of the team that he grew up cheering for. Maybe that is the closes his career and is the capper that he's seeking. I think both of those are possible. And I also think it's possible that maybe he does hit the ground running and think, yeah, I've got another one in me. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, it only gets harder, right? And I mean, he flat out said to me that this wasn't what he was expecting, has been challenging in ways that he wasn't expecting. And he thought that the ankle, when he rolled his ankle, it was going to be a day, and it turned out to be months. And he had multiple setbacks with it, and it was just such a major ordeal for him. That kind of stuff happens to major league players. And so I don't know that physically he can put himself through that again, but ultimately he's got to decide that. But I do think everything is premature right now. His whole sole focus is on this. That's the impression that I was left with, was figuring it out this year and seeing where he's at the end of it and deciding from there.
There's been a great deal of focus today, obviously, on Chris Bassitt's comments on the Chris Rose rotation. I know you and Arden Zwelling both had an opportunity to talk to Chris today. What did he say in terms of expanding, retracting, recontextualizing? Hell, I don't even know if that's a word. It sounds like a good word, though, doesn't it? What did he
just
tell?
Created it.
Yeah, I did. Sometimes that happens. What's your sense of the message he wanted to get out there? And do you think there's any, I hesitate to use the word fallout, do you think there's any reaction to this from the front office or from John Schneider?
I don't think there's going to be reaction to, look, I'm sure that the front office raised it with him and said, what did you mean? And I think that was the question that Arden and I just approached him with, was just, hey, what did you mean by this? Especially the one when he talked about, issues that you just can't, that aren't fixable, essentially. And he said that's more situational than structural. That was to me, that was the clarification I thought was most interesting. Is that people are reading it as into, saying this is something that's wrong with the team. But he's like, I'm going to be 36 next season, and there's nothing you can do about that. You can't not make me 36. And when you lose Bo Bichette for a period of time, you can't uninjure Bo Bichette.
Right.
And that was the thing that he kept, that he really wanted to clarify, that he felt that people were misinterpreting a little bit as him saying there are structural issues that need to be fixed and that there are problems. And it's more just things that are unchangeable in terms of age, in terms of the way that this roster had to play out this year. That was more something that you can't fix, and as opposed to something deeper. And so to me, that was really interesting, but he didn't shy away from those comments. And quite frankly, a lot of them were true. He's talking about how teams are built and you need more than one superstar player. I mean, that's very clear. You can look around everywhere. And like when this Blue Jays team was the best version of itself, they had multiple star caliber players carrying the load. That's just a fact of life. So I don't know that there was, maybe hearing him the way that he said it might have made it seem like it was maybe a bit of a bigger deal, but I think there was just a lot of truth in what he said, and really just a lot of things that have been painfully obvious if you've been watching all season long.
And of course, the beauty of that is that even if that wasn't the message he meant to send, that's how it kind of landed. And in some ways that might accomplish something to his benefit, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think a lot of people, and I've heard this in private conversations, that a lot of people are sort of acknowledging a lot of hard truths about where the Blue Jays are as an organization this year, right? That a lot of this organization has come under the microscope, rightly so, based on where they were a few years ago and where they are now and what's happened with the window of opportunity. And there are a lot of things that haven't gone right. And that's just a fact of life. It doesn't mean that everything that they're doing is wrong or that everything that they've done hasn't worked. But this was a team that a few years ago was in a very, very enviable situation, and that a few years later, it finds itself in a very difficult spot with a farm system that isn't able to replenish the big league roster, having not integrated enough young players along the way to help turn over and smooth over some of the free agent departures that have either happened or are going to happen. That's just the reality where they are. And so I don't have this sense that the Blue Jays are trying to just gloss over a lot of this stuff, but it's just, this is true. This is what it is. This is what everybody's seeing. And so, having it out there, having this discussion happen, having maybe some people in the organization have to face what other people see and how they perceive them, that can only be healthy, because that's what you're going to have to do in order to move forward. And as opposed to thinking everything's all right, I mean, it's not. This team's in a very difficult spot this offseason. Even after the trade deadline, even after the replenishment of the farm system, you've got essentially a borderline existential question in terms of what you're doing with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette. How are you going to leverage them if you do manage to re-sign one or both of them? There are a lot of challenges facing this team, and in all likelihood, some more challenging times ahead.
Shifting focus a little bit, Bowden Francis just being named the winner of the American League Player of the Week. Didn't see that coming at any point this year. Didn't think I'd be reporting that. And credit to him. But Shaw, watching him pitch yesterday, and watching him pitch against the Angels, and watching him use that two-seamer, and just the way he looked on the mound, right? The body language, the size, and all this stuff. He could solve a lot of issues for this team, couldn't he? If he can finish this year, and I'm not expecting him to go the rest of the year and not walk anybody. It'd be great if he did. But if he can finish the year sort of looking like this, he's answered a question for this team, hasn't he?
I mean, you don't want to just extrapolate automatically that this is going to repeat itself, because you could have projected some of what you're seeing right now last year and thought, okay, he's going to really solve a lot of problems for the team in 2024. And so you've got to be careful to not let recency bias just completely just get you into the position where you're looking at it saying, okay, but he's really taken a major step forward. And, I had a conversation with him in Anaheim, and I said to him, like, in a lot of ways, you're a different pitcher than you were at the beginning of the season. He said, yeah, I mean, he's using the sinker now, and that's something that he's recently incorporated. He's using the splitter now, which he's a little bit more consistent with, and he's feeling good about them. And he's not just trying to, use a fastball and the curveball and then occasionally mix in the slider now. I mean, he's got 4 weapons that he's using, and he's using them to better effect. And so the curveball has become a bit more of an effective weapon for him now, because you can't just lock in on either fastball or curveball, because you've got to deal with that split and you've got to worry about that sinker too. He's just pitching in a different way, and so the confidence, you see that playing. Now, what's going to happen when teams get a better handle on how to game plan him and how he's going to adjust once the league starts adjusting back to him? That's going to ultimately determine whether he can play or how substantial a role he ends up playing this year. But this is someone that, especially on the pitching staff, that a lot of people on that staff really believe in him and think that he's got the pieces that he needs. And he's holding his velocity, which is another thing that's really important, and something that he wasn't doing early in the season. So this is one of the good things that the Blue Jays can take from the next 2 months, if he's able to continue that, and like that they were able to give Bowden this runway and that he was able to capitalize on it. But he's still got to capitalize it, and I think they still have to. They're still going to need to see more before they can be, all right, this is 100% something that we're counting on next year.
Shaw, I know that John Schneider addressed this. What's your sense as to whether or not we will see Bo and or Jordan Romano at some point this season?
Well, the Blue Jays are hoping that both of them can get back, and it sounds like both of them are working towards that too. I think for Romano especially, that he would like to. It would do him a lot of good. It would do the Blue Jays a lot of good as they're sort of figuring out the next steps with him, just to see him back out on the mound. And what does it look like? And does that pain in the elbow, is it gone? Is it resolved after the surgery? Because you're only building him up for an inning, that you've got enough runway if he doesn't have any setbacks along the way. With Bo, like, this has been just an extremely bizarre season for him, a completely out of character season for him. I think for him, he'd probably enjoy a bit of peace of mind to just come back, and even if you have like a good week or a few good games, a few good at bats, you be like, okay, I'm back, and just be able to wash away the frustrations of this year. But I think with both those guys, you've got to just defer to health, and there's no sense in, Bo's already had the calf issue pop up twice. Romano had 2 cortisone shots before he got the surgery. I think you're going to get to the point where it just doesn't make sense to keep pushing. But right for the time being, there's enough runway. And if you get even a couple weeks, for both those guys, it could be worthwhile.
Shai, really good of you to join us today, man. Thanks so much.
Yeah, anytime.
Be well. That's Shai Davidi, our MLB insider with Sportsnet. Credit to Shai and Arden Swelling for digging in a little further to Chris Bassitt's comments on the Chris Rose rotation. And Chris Bassitt essentially saying that the issues he was talking about were more situational, not structural, which I think we take to mean doesn't think the organization stinks. It's just that it's been one of those years where a lot of things just haven't gone well. And, including that injury to Bo Bichette. And that, and if in fact, as I said, regardless of what he meant, it landed, I think, in a way that will probably resonate with a lot of people. And hopefully he does feel that way because, again, he's under contract for another year. And if the Jays are going to sign people in free agency this year, and I certainly think they'll take a shot at it, you certainly want, if an agent calls up Chris Bassitt or Chris Bassitt's agent or the player calls up Chris Bassitt, you certainly want the guy to say, hey, man, come on, this place is great. Like, they take care of us. They know what's going on. So your best salesman when it comes to free agency isn't the general manager. It's not the president of baseball operations. It's your players. And your players can go a long way towards fixing any issues that may arise in terms of perception. So certainly, if you're a Blue Jays fan, and that is what Chris Bassitt was trying to say, certainly that has to be taken as a positive. So again, we thank Shai for joining us. We well done to he and Arden for chasing that down and for getting clarification for us. We truly appreciate it. That is it for Blair and Barker. Well, it's it for Blair. I guess it's it for Barker as well because he wasn't here, so it's been it for him all day. I will be around following tonight's game for Blue Jays talk. Be back tomorrow, same time on Sportsnet 590 The Fan at Sportsnet with Blair and Barker. And like I said, maybe we'll call the big man and see if we can pull him away from painting the deck. There he is. Look at that. We'll see if we can pull him away from painting the deck and maybe come on and give us some of his insight because I know that he's going to be texting me all game. So that's it for us. Fan pre-game's next. Have a great day. Enjoy the baseball. And see you tomorrow.